All attendees, please silence your mobile devices and take your seats. Our program will begin shortly. All attendees, please take your seats. Our program is about to begin. Please welcome Angie Jones, Vice President of Developer Experience at the Agentic AI Foundation.
Hello. Welcome to MCP Dev Summit. Are y'all having a good time so far? Wonderful. Okay, this room is already more lively than Bangalore. Don't tell them I said that, all right? So great to be here. We're thrilled to be in Mumbai. We have an amazing show for you all in store. We have MCP contributors, we have MCP builders, we have MCP users all across the industry. And so today and tomorrow it's going to be full of great talks. You'll have keynotes, you have your workshops. This morning, we'll have track sessions. And the idea is just so that we can all learn from one another. This is a brand new space. We're all tinkering. We're all trying to figure things out. And so it's great to be here to share our knowledge with each other, okay? My hope is that you'll leave here after these 2 days inspired by the incredible speakers, each other, and everything that you've learned. You'll take that back to work with you next week. Speaking of which, I want to take a moment to just thank the wonderful program committee who put together the conference. Please give them a round of applause. They worked tirelessly, reviewing hundreds of applications, and had the very tough job of selecting the sessions that will make up the program. And I think they did a wonderful job. Let me know if you disagree, but I think you'll be very pleased with all of the sessions today and tomorrow. Also, very special thanks to our diamond sponsor, AWS. Please give them a big round of applause. AWS helped make this event possible, so we truly, truly thank them. Okay, a little bit of housekeeping. So this evening, after the sessions, I invite you to stick around, okay? The fun doesn't stop after the last talk. We'll have an attendee reception where there will be food, there will be drinks, and more importantly, there will be great conversations. So make sure you meet people that you didn't already know, share tips and tricks, network a bit. How many of you know that's a really important part of the conference is networking? That's right. Okay, so don't miss that. All right, shall we get into some MCP? Yes? So about this time last year, I spoke at the very first MCP Dev Summit. This was in New York, organized by Shannon. Y'all give it up for Shannon. Shannon is a community member like the rest of us who took it upon himself and said, you know what, we need a summit. And he put that together. So I was there at the very first summit. The protocol was maybe about 6 months old at the time. And it was starting to get a lot of attention, but people were still, you know, just kind of tinkering. So at that conference, I shared how we had rolled MCP out across our 12,000 employee company, right? And this totally blew people's minds at the time. But since then, MCP growth has exploded. The registry has grown 8 times. SDK downloads are approaching 100 million. GitHub momentum is through the roof. And most importantly, adoption is moving beyond just the individual contributors, right? 67% of CTOs are now considering MCP as the default standard in their companies. Now, as MCP has scaled across thousands of companies across the globe, some of its teenage pimples started to surface. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because when that happens, it gives us insight into what are the challenges that people are facing. And there's a new release coming out July 29th. This is a release candidate, and this candidate provides several ways that the protocol attempts to address some of the issues that we've seen out in the wild. Now, the upcoming release makes MCP easier to operate. So historically, MCP used protocol sessions. This release removes that requirement, and it makes the request self-contained. Now, as a stateless protocol, MCP no longer needs to remember who you are or what you were doing in between tool calls. And when applications need to maintain state across multiple interactions, they can do so through explicit handles that are passed between the tool calls. MCP clients, they connect to multiple servers in a given session. How many of you are using multiple MCP servers when you try to do something? A lot of you, exactly. And guess what? Each server comes with its own OAuth flow, login, what's the refresh rules. All of that is different per server. So this release is going to tighten the rules around identity and trust. So clients can safely manage all of these connections without making assumptions about who issued a token or where an auth response came from. Another part of growing up is knowing when you don't need to try to do everything, you know? So instead of a built-in logging mechanism, the protocol will now lean into observability platforms that teams already use. This is already a solved problem. MCP doesn't need to solve this. So now you can use things like OpenTelemetry to understand what's happening across your MCP flows. Sampling is the protocol feature that lets an MCP server say, hey, client, ask this question to the LLM that you're using, let me know what it says. And then I'm gonna, do something with that information. So this enabled servers to borrow the LLM from the client. That's been deprecated in this new release. Sad, I know, this is one of my favorite features of the protocol, but it is reasonable to argue that maybe model invocation doesn't belong in the protocol itself. So now the servers that need model access, they will integrate with LLM providers directly, okay? So if you're building an MCP server, you were kind of borrowing that LLM, you're gonna have to fix that, okay? Roots. How many of you are familiar with roots? This is one of the OG features of MCP. This gives the clients a way to tell the servers, here's your working space. Here's where you're allowed to work on the user's environment, right? The release candidate deprecates roots as a dedicated protocol feature, and it moves towards more explicit approaches where the workspace scope is carried along with the request, okay? So while these features are being deprecated, they're all have alternative methods of doing the same thing. So you're not losing functionality, but you do need to use an alternative approach that's outside of the protocol itself. Now, one of the hardest problems any young protocol has to face is ensuring that it can grow, that it can evolve. And the release candidate does a wonderful job with this. MCP has opened the door to a flood of innovation, right? And many of these ideas, they simply need the time, they need the space to grow and to mature. So this release gives extensions a more structured path forward where they can evolve independently. They can go out and get adoption with different clients, with the servers. They can work with the SDK authors and make sure that they're building some momentum and some adoption outside of the core specification, all right? Another important addition is a formal life cycle of protocol features. So features are now classified as active, deprecated, or removed. And that gives implementers a predictable path as the protocol continues to mature. So for example, logging, sampling, and roots, these are now all deprecated in this release candidate. If those deprecations remain in the final specification, which launches in July, then those features will continue to work for at least 1 year. So that's a commitment that the maintainers are giving the community. Hey, you got a year to figure out a different approach here, okay? The release candidate also ties conformance more directly to the standards process. So now, protocol features, they need matching scenarios before they can get into that final state, right? And so this is in a test suite that runs, and I love tests. What I love about them is that they create a shared definition of what correct behavior actually looks like. So this reduces the risk of misinterpretations of a feature, or everyone just kind of rallying around whatever implementation the leading lab is going with. Now we know what's the expectation, and everyone can test against that same expectation, okay? Now, the purpose of a release candidate is to give the community an early heads up of what's to come, right? As well as an opportunity to test it, to provide feedback to the maintainers. So what that means is that between now and July, you all have some homework to do, right? So if you're building MCP servers, if you're building MCP clients, if you're building MCP SDKs, then this is a great time to test out the release candidate. You want to ask yourself, can requests move across server instances without losing important context? If so, or if not, then you want to look for hidden dependencies in your sessions. You want to review any usages of the deprecated features, sampling, routes, logging, right? These are likely to be removed within a year, so you want to start migrating to alternative solutions. And then you want to validate your client authorization flow against the updated guidance in the release. Make sure everything is behaving correctly across your MCP servers, your auth servers, your credential sets, okay? And then the release candidate also introduces full JSON schema support, which is great. Now you can be more expressive about inputs and outputs, but don't get cute here. You need to put some limits around the schema validation. Be careful with external references so that you don't degrade performance and you don't introduce any security risks, okay? Now, when people look back at this release, I don't think that they'll remember the nitty-gritty details like the protocol becoming stateless or, JSON schema and things like that. What they'll remember is that this is the release where MCP began phasing out of that youthful, chaotic phase and actually started growing up. It became easier to operate. It became more focused. It became easier to evolve. And that's really important because open standards succeed when lots of different people can innovate, can experiment, can even disagree. And that's ultimately what we're aiming to accomplish at the Agentic AI Foundation. Not just building protocols, but creating conditions for healthy ecosystems around them. So MCP has had an incredible year, and this release makes me optimistic about the next 10. All right, so our next keynote is CTO and co-founder of the Agentic AI Foundation. His name is Manik Sartani. He's a good friend of mine. And Manik is going to discuss why AAIF was formed. Little hint, we want to keep the future of AI agents open, interoperable, and community governed, okay? So Manik will come and tell you more about that. Please give him a very warm welcome.
Thank you, Angie. Hello, everybody. Right now, this year, the plumbing of the entire agentic era is being laid. How agents prove who they are, how they transact, who ultimately they answer to. There's a version of this story where one company, or maybe a few companies, quietly ends up owning all of it, and everyone else ends up paying rent forever. I don't want to live in that world. And let me tell you about the one I'm fighting for instead, and the story behind it. So, Angie, thank you for the intro. I'm Manik Sartani. I'm the CTO and co-founder of the Agentic AI Foundation. Before this, I led open source at Block for a few years. I ran cloud engineering for Cash App and had a hand in the birth of gRPC as well many years ago. I've spent a long time at Red Hat. So you might say I'm kind of biased when it comes to open source. I've done a lot of stuff in open source. But this isn't a story about me. This is a story, I'm going to start with a story from last year. And this is a story about Goose. At Block, I helped popularize an open source coding agent framework called Goose, along with Angie. Goose's backstory, basically, it's something we built in-house at Block. It gained popularity, it started gaining adoption. We thought this would be a fantastic candidate to open source. Give it out to the community and just see where people run with it. Goose found its people. It found a community. You could see it starting to form around it. Lots of contributors. It was great. But then we hit a whole bunch of headwinds. The code was open. The license was very business-friendly. It was Apache licensed. Yet the trademarks, the direction, the roadmap, and the future of Goose still belonged to one company. Yeah, that was Block. And there were a lot of people who were not comfortable with that, about betting their businesses on the infrastructure that one company ultimately controlled. So they wanted a neutral home. People kept asking, who keeps this open? Who governs it? And who can change the rules? The honest answer was not a good one. So I went looking for a better answer. The deeper I went, the more I realized this was not a Goose problem. This was not an AI problem. We've seen this problem many times before in tech, and we're about to see it repeat again across the whole agentic stack. I became convinced enough that I left Block. I left a great job at Block to do this full time. So let me tell you what I was afraid of. That rent story that I started out with, I want to convince you that that isn't hyperbole. We've watched this pattern play out before. A little bit about the whole plumbing analogy as well. I was rehearsing this presentation with my wife yesterday, and she was like, what's all this plumbing business about? You're not going to a plumbing conference. Plumbing kind of sounds boring. It's like, well, yes, that's the point. Plumbing is supposed to be boring. It's supposed to be the sort of thing you don't think about. Do you think about plumbing very often? Not really, right? I bet you think about it when it doesn't work, right? Then you really think about it. And you'll pay a lot of money to make sure it works, so it doesn't break. So this is the sort of plumbing I'm talking about. Every time there's a new generational shift in technology, we see new plumbing, new connective tissue that makes everything work. It's TCP/IP, or HTTP, POSIX, so the container runtime. Every time there's a window where whoever can move really fast can own the plumbing that everyone else depends on. And that's pretty dangerous. The plumbing for AI agents is in that window right now. It's how an agent proves who it is, how it calls a tool, how it pays, how it leaves an audit trail that you can trust and validate. If someone captures that plumbing, the whole ecosystem has a new landlord, and the rest of us are going to be paying rent to that landlord. Right? So it's a very real scenario here. And we've seen what happens when the plumbing gets captured. Let's take social media, for example. Every platform that runs our social lives, they started benign. I mean, no one was evil and twirling their mustaches and I'm going to control the world here. But they all turned into walled gardens because the incentives rewarded walled gardens and an attention economy. And there was no referee that said you can't do that. Now, the agentic version is even bigger and far more consequential. Social media sat between you and the world and captured your attention, right? Agentic AI replaces parts of that world. It captures your function, what you do, what you make, what you decide. Same script, far bigger explosion, and also far bigger prize and far bigger incentives to capture all that, right? So you talk about AI models. I think models are converging. They'll eventually become interchangeable for most common use cases, at least. And that's good, right? Like you want choice, you want diversity in models. But in agentic AI, the hard problems don't live in the model. The hard stuff lives between the model and the real world. That's the identity, the attestation, audits, policies, payments. That's not the intelligence layer. It's a set of agreements. And agreements only hold if no single party controls them. A protocol owned by one vendor is basically private property, where someone left the gate open and invited you in. You can come and hang out, but they can kick you out anytime they want to. They can shut that gate anytime they want to. We've seen that happen, right? We know what that looks like. So the uncomfortable thing for this room, now this is a room who believes in open source, right? Everyone here believes in open source? Lots of, yes? So do I, right? Open source is not enough. Open source is not enough, and that's the uncomfortable truth here. Most open AI is open at some sponsor's pleasure. Remember when Llama was the open model that everyone believed that this is going to be the flag bearer of open source in AI? What happened to that, right? It was open until Llama 4 under-delivered, it got shelved, went closed. It was only open for a while, for the time being. Not forever. No guarantees. Right? Now, the uncomfortable truth is every open weight model alive today carries that same risk. There's no real foundation behind many of them to guarantee their openness. Here's another example from recent history. But to be clear, this isn't a story about a villain. There's no bad guy here. This is a story about incentives. 2 open source projects, same company, both brilliant. Android launched to keep Apple from owning a monopoly in mobile, right? Good for all of us, right? Great for all of us. But it never went to a neutral foundation. And eventually, control consolidated. It's still technically open, but one company owns the keys to Android. Now let's look at Kubernetes. Also from Google, again, launched to prevent a monopoly in cloud, and this time donated to a neutral foundation from the start, the CNCF. Nobody could recapture it. Even AWS contributes to it. So does Microsoft. So many companies do. All the hyperscalers do. Same company. Same brilliant use of open source to break a monopoly. Both wins for everybody. The only difference is one had a referee, which results in it being truly free, and the other one being recaptured. Now, to be clear, Google isn't bad or evil. This isn't about that. It's just following structural incentives, like anyone would. And Google is a platinum member of the Agentic AI Foundation, too. They see the value in a neutral referee and in a neutral foundation. So what are we building towards? My bet, in a year or two, sooner than most people probably expect, agents will be able to authenticate to a system it's never seen and prove what it's allowed to do a task, including paying for that task, and leave an audit trail that anyone can verify across vendors, across clouds, across organization boundaries, with nothing negotiated in advance, all based on open standards. Agents talking to agents, regardless of who built them. The way a browser talks to any web server today. Boring, universal, taken for granted, just like plumbing. That's kind of what I want. When the stack disappears into the background, just like plumbing, when it just works, that's when we would have done our job. Now, we all know what that requires, right? It requires open standards, open protocols, open frameworks. But who keeps it open? Who guarantees that? This is the answer that I went looking for back when the Goose community put that question to me. It's like, who keeps this stuff open, right? And I found that Anthropic were wrestling with the same question for MCP. And the answer we arrived at was to create the Agentic AI Foundation. OpenAI didn't love being left out, and they wanted to join in too, so they brought a project in. And so Block, Anthropic, OpenAI co-created, co-founded the Agentic AI Foundation. Two of those three companies compete very fiercely, as you're well aware. But rival logos and the same charter for the same outcome. When we launched in December, alongside Google, Microsoft, AWS, Cloudflare, and Bluebird, 6 months later, we're over 200 companies strong. So that's a signal, right? That must mean something. But the real early signal that matters the most to me is some of our working groups have 50 to 70 companies working together in the same room, many of them direct competitors, and they're choosing to figure this stuff out together. So I want to be honest with you guys, we're not finished. The unfinished parts are the bits, to me, that matter the most. Let me give you one example that I kind of lose sleep over, that worries me. Agentic commerce, how agents discover, negotiate, and pay for things. Think about how the world we already live in. Like almost every card purchase runs through a handful of networks. Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and in the US, they take somewhere between 2 to 3% of every sale, right? That's well over $100 billion a year skimmed off the top of commerce. And here's the part that really matters. No one's bad. That's not villainy. It came from perfectly reasonable incentives. Right? Someone built the rails that everyone needed, sat at the toll booth, and collected rent. Now agents are about to start doing the buying. Agentic commerce could become the default way everyone shops. And the protocols for how an agent conducts commerce, well, that's being written right now. And some of the most consequential proposals are arriving from single vendors with no neutral governance. If one of those things quietly becomes the de facto standard for the world, guess what? We would have built the next 2 to 3% toll booth for everything we do. That kind of sucks, right? That's not hypothetical. That's a real risk. That's a real risk we're facing today. And it's not only commerce. Identity and trust, that's still fragmented, that's still being formed. And underneath all of that is a problem of pace. The standards are getting built faster than they're going to a neutral home. And that's the gap between what's shipped and what's governed in the open. And when you have that gap, that's where capture can happen. Now, unlike social media, we have a difference. The difference here is the window is still open. The agentic layer is still being figured out, it's still being built. It's ours to shape. Social media, the walls came up really quickly before anyone could ask who governs this stuff, right? This time it's different. This time we're going to ask first. We have a chance to ask first. We have a chance to choose. And this is where all of you come in. So this matters to me, like I said. I quit my job over it, and I work in the foundation full time. And I know it matters to everyone here. Everyone here cares about open source, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. This isn't an ask, really. It's more of an invitation to let's work on this stuff together. If you're a builder, building the plumbing, the identity, protocols, observability, etc., build it in the open, build it in a neutral foundation to begin with, and work with us and figure this out. If you're a buyer of technology, demand that your vendors work on open protocols. Demand open protocols, open standards. Ask them who can change the rules, who can take the stuff away from me. You've got a lot more power than you think as a purchaser of technology. And if you're building the next cool thing, build it on open standards. Build it on an open foundation. That way no one can pull that from under you as well. Really important stuff. We don't know what the canonical agentic architecture will look like yet. It's all still too new. It's still being formed. But whatever we do figure out, I want us to figure it out together. Figure it out in the open, remember? Owned by no one, built to outlast all of us. When we started the AAIF, we started with 40 companies. 6 months on, we're over 200 and growing fast. Some people say it's faster than the CNCF. I haven't really fact-checked that. But think of what we can all do together. There's a lot of us here, and we all seem to care. The plumbing of the agentic era shouldn't belong to anyone. It should belong to everyone. So let's build it right while we still can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manik. That was so inspiring. Do y'all feel fired up? Right? I do as well. Great. So Manik welcomed you or invited you to become a part of this movement. I'll tell you, when MCP first launched, I was so excited. I knew. And we got a little sneak preview before it hit the market at Block. And so I knew that this was going to be big, right? And I was so excited. I just couldn't wait for it to launch. And there was actually a little bit of a time, you remember, like maybe the first couple of months, and nobody was really talking about it. I was like, what's wrong with y'all? Wake up. Like, this is hot, right? And then after a couple of months, people finally caught on. And then you saw people like Shannon get involved. You saw people like our next speaker, Abhijay, get involved. And so this is great. You have an invitation. You do not have to wait for anyone to come and tap you on the shoulder to say, come get involved. This is your invitation right now. And so Abhijay Jain is going to come and share his story of how he just jumped into the community. He is a contributor on the Goose Project, which Manik talked about, right? And Abhijay, I'm in the community. I'm one of the contributors as well. And we didn't know who Abhijay was. He came in and he just put up a PR one day. Then he put up another PR. and then another, and to the point we said, hey, would you like to become a maintainer of the project? And he's been with us ever since. He's a Goose Grant recipient, and he's gonna come and share how he's working on Goose to extend the community-built tools and the integrations using GooseBot as a real-world example. Please give it up for Abhijay.
Thanks, Angie. So, hi everyone, myself Abhijay Jain, and today I will be talking about what is Goose, what are different projects under Goose ecosystem, and how it can finally help us building an AI teammate for open source. So a bit about myself. So I've been contributing to open source from past 6 years now. I have worked with organizations like IBM Open Source, Linux Foundation, Spiral, orgs like BTC Pay Server as well. And currently I'm working as a contributor, maintainer, and grant recipient at Goose. So how it all started? So back in 2025, when I was working on a project with Spiral, one of my teammates asked me, hey Vijay, have you tried this new thing named Goose? And just like you all, I was wondering, what is Goose? Is it a new AI platform or something like that? So I tried it on based off his recommendation. I loved it, and it became my AI teammate. So what exactly Goose offer differently? And what made it stand out for me and many others out there? So first of all, Goose is a general purpose open source AI agent that works in your machine and lets you bring your own keys. So that's a big statement, right? So by open source, I mean it's free, it's transparent, it's privacy focused, and also it's very community driven when it comes to development. It lets you bring your own keys, which makes it model agnostic. So you are not bound to any specific model. You can use any model you want. We have 15 plus provider, and if you feel like that is less, you can use any custom provider you want based on OpenAI, Anthropic, or Llama. We also, Goose also offers the support for local models, so you can connect that if you want full privacy and use Goose with that. Other than this, like there are some certain core functionalities in Goose, so we will discuss that. First functionality that we have is extensions. So what are extensions? As its name suggests, it's an add-on to Goose that extend its capabilities. Like it lets you connect to different tools and application to your Goose application, and it's based on MCPs. So we have documented 70 plus MCPs, but like you can connect to any MCP out there, be it standard IO or streamable HTTP. You have the support for custom MCPs. You like just need to configure that and connect it to your Goose server. On top of that, we have MCP UI. So what is MCP UI? It's mostly like you have the interactive chat. So as you can see here in this example, someone called the MCP weather resource preview. So someone asked for the weather, and you might be thinking it's an image, but it's not an image. It's an interactive MCP. You can like see the weather changing. You can ask like what are the different weather for the different days, and it will change accordingly. On top of that, we have MCP apps. So many enterprises using MCP as these days. So you can like just import your existing MCP apps, even build them further, or like just ask Goose to like build MCP app for you and export it and deploy it for your workspaces. So we discussed MCP at Goose. Let's discuss recipes. Like it's also one of the core functionalities. So what are recipes? Recipes are like reusable workflows that you can use for a specific task. So it's like it contains different parameters, different things like prompts, settings, and also extensions. So let's try to understand it with an example. So if you have a code base to edit, so you can like create a recipe for that, and it will like do all the stuff for you, like all the instructions it has, all the MCPs that you have defined, all the settings that you have used, like models, what temperature is it on, and you can like use it for other 20 projects as well, like if you want. So some people get confused between recipes and skills. So skills are mostly instructions. It's like how to do things, and recipes mostly focus on what to do. So we have discussed Goose. We have discussed what are the core functionalities. Let's now discuss the Goose projects ecosystem. So some people think like Goose is a project. Some people say it's a product, another AI product. But I say it's a platform. It's the infra. So now you will understand like why I'm saying that. So Goose has like different projects under its ecosystem. It's like Mesh LLM, Goose in a Pond, Goose distribution, and finally Goose bot that I am working on. So let's try to understand each project one by one. So Mesh LLM is a project that lets you run larger open models with shared compute. So we all want to like use the larger open source model, but we lack the compute. So you can like share it, like share your compute by running a mesh, or like if you lack the compute, you can also connect to like existing mesh there and like use their compute for running that model so that everyone can benefit. Other project here is a Goose Pond. That's an interesting name, right? So what Goose Pond does? So like it's a smart home assistant that is fully private and fully local, even including the voice. So you can like connect it to your existing hardware devices and give the instructions, and your data is like not touching the cloud. So you won't see the recommendation for the things you are asking. And finally, we have Goose distributions. So what are Goose distributions? So we are backing Goose for the different. Goose works seamlessly on Mac OS, Linux, and Windows. But like with Goose distributions, we are working on the SDKs so that like you can use those SDKs and build on top of Goose, just like people build the Goose Pond and other projects. So let's talk about GooseBot now. So before talking about GooseBot, let me set a concept for it, like why we even need it. So when I was contributing to Goose, one question kept bugging me, and that is why Goose can help me, but not my entire team at once. So I am connecting all the MCPs with Goose. I'm using it in my different workspaces. But like whenever it comes to teams, like they are not existing, they are like not able to use it in a distributed way. For example, if you are using X, you might be using Grok a lot for the fact check and all the other stuff that it does. So it's like a shared layer. You can like just ask Grok, it get the context of the tweet, and you can ask on top of that. So, but we really can't do that with the Goose Writer or like the other coding projects in our workspaces. So what it lets you do, it lets org admin set up a shared instance of Goose. It can be any model that you want, and like it connected to your workspaces, and you can like use Goose there. Its capabilities, like different MCPs in your chat, even the recipes you can call. You can like just make Goose part of your discussion and like ask it to like create a PR if you want to. So I have created a extension for integration for GitHub right now, and it works exactly like ChatGPT connector or CodeRabbit. But like it has the more capabilities, like you can connect it to different MPCs, and like it will also get the its abilities. So how it works, like you developers create a PR, GooseBot reviews that, it shares this suggestion and feedback, and developers can act on it. They can ask follow-up questions. They can ask it to like create follow-up PRs, fix the commits and stuff. So this is the GooseBot in action. So like if I created a PR, you can, as you all can see, like the GooseBot has reviewed it, shared its finding. I can ask for other stuff to do it, like calling a specific MCP, things like that in the GitHub chat only. So the future plan is, like we already developed Goose for GitHub, but like we in future we are focusing on GitLab, Slack, Discord, and others. So internally we use this GooseBot on Discord, but currently the setup is like really hard. It's really hard to set up it for your workspaces. So I'm working on like reducing that effort so that like it's plug and play. You just connect it and use it on your own. So like if you all want to try it, you can like just join our Discord and or join Goose, also see Goose Docs if you have any question. So for the closing note, I just want to say, like I just started as a user. I started contributing to Goose, and now I'm working on the projects that are extending it. So I invite you all to like just try it once. Maybe like just start over, just start to contribute, and maybe like in future you are also extending Goose, or maybe giving a keynote explaining it to all others. So yeah, thank you for this. And like if you have any questions or want to know more about Goose, I'm around. You can say hi. Bye.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Abhijay, for the keynote, also for jumping in and pitching in. You saw a need. You didn't wait for someone else to solve it. That's what this space is all about, right? That's what that open window that Manu talked about is all about. This is the time where we as a community can shape what we want agentic AI to be. And you have that opportunity with MCP, with Goose, which is an MCP client, like any of the projects under our foundation, we welcome you to jump in. Our next keynote speaker, David, is the Director of Developer Experience at AWS. And David is going to come up and talk about more about the AIF community. He'll share more about how you can get involved. with the development of agentic AI standards, and also just encouraging like broader open source participation, okay? Give it up for David.
Kazakh Mumbai. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for coming out, especially on a weekend. And it's amazing to hear stories around how projects like Goose were started, how community members come in and want to contribute to it, and how they're building the future. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a bit. I want to talk a little bit about how this interoperability, and we got a great vision of the future from Manik, really fulfilling the role of a CTO and telling us what the vision of the future is. I think I want to spend a little bit of time talking about how we action that via open source. So, as you've heard, and you're going to see some amazing things, Angie talked about how many downloads MCP had seen. We're seeing a lot of people give a ton of attention to things like MCP. AIF, I did fact check this, grew more in 3 months than CNCF did in a year. I was actually a Linux Foundation employee in the very early days of CNCF, when Kubernetes was coming into CNCF. And so I remember the incredible pace there. I thought it was really fast. I also got the chance to serve as the president of the Apache Software Foundation during the big data years. So when big data was exploding and we were building things like Hadoop and Spark, and all of that innovation was happening, I thought, wow, man, things are moving really fast. This is moving so much faster. So going to this level of downloads, having this much attention, seeing this much disruption, I think it creates a ton of opportunity. And I'm going to talk a little more about that opportunity in just a minute. I do want to announce that just last week, we announced a new project at the Agentic AI Foundation, Agent Gateway. Joining the foundation is really an arduous task. The technical steering committee spends a lot of time vetting projects to make sure that they are actually something that's going to benefit the public, that it actually has a lot of adoption, that there is more than one owner, more than one contributor to that already before it even comes to the foundation. We don't want a single vendor project coming in and effectively getting the stamp of approval that comes with being an AAIF project. So really happy that Agent Gateway has joined us and gives us a control plane to consistently apply security, observability, routing, and governance across AI, agent, and application traffic. So please go check this out. This is going to be something that's going to be one of those really exciting projects, much like MCP, Goose, MCP and Goose are today. So when we're thinking about what the Agentic AI Foundation is focused on, it isn't models today. It's protocols, it's tooling, and it's standards. Except normally when you say standards, that's a bad thing. How many people have worked with W3C or OMG or one of the standards bodies? How many years did it take you to get things done? I was working on a protocol that was going to be a fast-track project. And after 2 years, we still hadn't gotten anything ratified. And that was a fast-track project. So in the agentic AI era, you can't run it as we did standards from 30 or 40 years ago. Those standards bodies are valuable. They've done amazing work over the years. But the technology is changing so fast that it won't wait. And open source is an ideal platform for this because we can build reference implementations and define the protocol as we're going along. So the 100 million downloads, that's not of the protocol. That's of SDKs, right? People are actually putting it into play. And so when we're marrying the protocol and the standard and the implementation all at the same time, it allows us to move so much faster. And this pattern is something that open source has done really well for many years. So now you're going to get to see that I have outdated slides. I promise this was accurate last week. Last week, there were 199 members. And you heard from Manik that there are over 200 now. I actually complained, I think I complained to Angie about this last week, that I really wish it would get up so that I could just have 200 there. There are more than 200 members now of the Agentic AI Foundation. That's great. It's one signal, though, right? Because this is a signal that companies are providing, not individual contributors. One of the things that I'm actually excited about, so I have an agent that goes and walks the mailing lists for the working groups and the Discord channels for the working groups. There are over 500 people participating in the working groups every single month. That's amazing. That's, when you talk about open source growth, that's unheard of. So the people who are working on security, identity, governance, observability, all of those things that are broader than a single project, those people are coming together and helping to define the future. And I'm really excited about that. I think that's a key opportunity that you can get involved in. I do want to give credit to some of the folks, some of the companies who've stood up and joined AAIF already. So we have the platinum members, and you saw and heard those. I want to walk through, though, the gold members. There are many gold members, a ton of slides worth of gold members. And these are folks who are contributing. That's not all. We also have silver members. And look at some of the names here. Some of these are absolute titans in their corner of the world. Lots of names that you recognize, people who are having impact on the tech sector and recognizing that AAIF is the place to do that. And there's more. This should show you that there is tremendous interest in this corner of technology where there's so much innovation happening. And so I want to call out this project velocity is really important, but there's another step that we're going to have to take. So version 1.37 of Goose just came out. There's the new release candidate that Angie was talking about for MCP's protocol standard. There are more projects in the wing. The technical steering committee spends a lot of time looking at projects, and there's a number of those that we're in the middle of evaluating and talking with the project about. That's all incredibly exciting. And you know, I mentioned the more than 500 people. I want to talk about a specific way that you can get involved. So you can certainly join a working group. You can contribute to a project. We had a great story about contributing to Goose as a project. You can go contribute to Goose. You can contribute to agents.md. You can contribute to Agent Gateway, or of course, MCP. Please consider that. Please go fix a problem that annoys you. One of the wonderful things about open source is that it allows you to go get involved. But I also think that all of this innovation is changing the way that we work. And I want to leave you just with one thing. I read a paper recently called The Dynamo and the Computer. And it's from the 80s, early 80s. And it compares the degree of innovation that happened when electricity was introduced to manufacturing plants. Anyone want to guess how much efficiency was achieved when plants got electricity and moved away from steam or water power? Anyone want to throw out a number? Percentage of efficiency increase? 3%. And the reason is that for all of the advance in power distribution that came with electricity, the plants weren't set up. They weren't set up to take advantage of it. They were still running the plants the same way they had been running them with water power or steam power, and it didn't translate to new efficiency. I think we have this tremendous opportunity where there's so much innovation and technology to redefine the way that we work. And in addition to getting involved in these open source projects, that's what I want to encourage you to do. Spend some time thinking about how do we transform and make all of this technology do amazing things for us in the most efficient way. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, David. Great. So you now have multiple ways that you can contribute. Yes? All right. When I see you in the hallway, when we take our selfie, you're going to tell me how you're going to get involved too, right? All right. Great. So our last keynote speaker for today is Shannon Williams. Shannon is also a great example of a community member, saw MCP early on, said, hey, there's something to this. And Shannon, being the community organizer that he is, put together the very first MCP Dev Summit, and he did several iterations after that and kind of just pinged us in our DMs. Hey, you seem like you know about MCP, you've been talking about it, come to this summit, and we gathered. And so this is a great example of kind of getting involved very early and building something great, right? And since then, Shannon has donated the MCP Dev Summit to the AAIF, and now we're here in places like Mumbai, so that is wonderful. So Shannon is also, he has a full-time job. He is the president of Obot AI, and he's going to discuss the 4-stage maturity model for MCP adoption, from shadow development to enterprise-wide deployment. Please give it up for Shannon Williams.
Thanks, Angie. And thank everyone for being here. It is, if you'd have told me a year ago when we were starting the first MCP Dev Summit in San Francisco that we would be in Mumbai with hundreds of people on a Sunday, I would have thought you were crazy. But I'm so glad it has happened. It is incredible seeing what has happened to the ecosystem in just 1 year. Because a year ago, there were only about 150 of us in that room, including David, including Angie, including David Soryapara, who created MCP, talking about, well, what if this starts to take off? What would it look like if people were building with this? And today, here we are. People are building with it. There are tens of thousands of MCPs out there. There are MCPs in every organization. Who here has an MCP on their laptop? Yeah, we're all using it every day. We're using it, and we're using it to do amazing, amazing things. Things that somebody like me, who didn't start as a developer, who started as my career as a journalist, I could never have imagined the kind of things I can do now without calling an engineer to help me. But today I can do almost anything I can imagine. I can talk to almost any system. I can connect that system with all sorts of other systems. I can build automation. And what's great about it is that's what happens every time we introduce this technology to new people. So while the first big wave of MCP adoption came with engineers working on their laptop, we're in the middle of the second wave, I would say, which is engineers using coding assistants. But the third wave, the wave only a few companies have gotten to, is the wave where every single employee has access to AI assistants and agents that can talk to every system they use to do work so that they can be more efficient. They can do the kind of things that we're all doing right now when it comes to software development. And so this talk is kind of about that. It's like, what does it look like as we go from a small handful of people using MCPs to everybody using MCPs? And that is starting to happen often without controls in a lot of places. So OBOT, we're a software company. We build tools to help people manage MCPs. And so I spend a lot of my day talking with organizations who are trying to figure out how they're going to deliver MCPs at scale to their teams. So I work a lot more on the inside than the outside. I don't help people necessarily, build the MCP for Salesforce, but rather people trying to figure out how to use that MCP for Salesforce and get it in the hands of their employees. And today, that's not easy because the truth is there's a lot of heterogeneous tools in organizations. These are a couple of quotes I pulled from conversations I've had just in the last month from teams and organizations trying to figure out how they're going to deliver MCP as a service, how they're going to deliver the new agentic AI stack. And the challenges come in lots of forms. One, we're using a real mix of different clients. So people are using Claude, they're using Cursor, they're using Codex, they're using GitHub's MCP servers, they're using all sorts of different things, and trying to connect those has been challenging. And often there's a lack of visibility. People really don't know what's happening. At the same time, these MCPs are doing things sometimes that people aren't prepared for. So the ability to tell what they're doing, to know how they're working, has been challenging. I think if we add to that the fact that MCP isn't the only plugin to our clients, that we're also now starting to work with tools, and we're starting to work with things called plugins, and we're starting to work with sandboxes, and we're starting to work with agents that are running on infrastructure off the laptop, the complexity starts to go up, and the challenge of how am I going to manage all these things and how am I going to deliver a secure environment becomes quite real for a lot of people. And I think it's important to do that. When we ran the first MCP Dev Summit last May, there hadn't really been a public MCP-centric security vulnerability announced. That has not stayed the same. In November, we saw the first malicious MCP servers arrive that were widely discovered, and we're doing things like taking an MCP and building basically an MCP that stole that identity and injected malicious activities. We saw MCP-level issues in the protocol. We saw new attacks emerge that effectively were Trojan-like and allowed for upgrades, and those upgrades to MCP servers suddenly had bad activity. And we've seen this go on and on, literally month by month by month. There's been new kinds of attacks focused on this widespread adoption. And that has driven a lot of organizations to think about MCP as something they need to put more controls around. We certainly have seen, as that has happened, some organizations tapping the brake, slowing down their adoption, but I don't think that's really an option. I can tell you from almost every organization I talk to, they are not going to take their foot off the gas when it comes to AI adoption. Their competitors are using it, they need to use it, and they need to find secure ways to do it. And so the place we find ourselves in right now is one where we have to move pretty quickly from open and potentially uncontrolled consumption of tools to secure and well-controlled consumption of tools. And about 6 months ago, I started working on a model to try and explain to people the progress that organizations are trying to go through to move from sort of shadow adoption of IT to a controlled implementation of a set of policies and tools that would help them get there. We're right in the middle of this right now. I think a lot of organizations still find themselves at stage one. MCPs are being adopted. They're being used locally on laptops by developers, or they're being used remotely on laptops by engineers or employees, and they may or may not be under any governance at all from the organization. This is definitely not a bad thing in and of itself. It's a pretty good sign that your organization is forward-leaning, adopting new technologies, doing AI-assisted work and AI-assisted development, but it is a starting point that you can move towards control from. I think a lot of people have actually started to move from stage one to stage two, and this is where organizations, especially since coding assistance drove sort of rapid development of tooling and started the beginning of standardization of tooling, we see a lot of people now where AI clients are starting to consolidate. They have a known set, at least this team over here is using Claude, and this team over here is using Cursor. We've now got an enterprise Claude subscription, and we're starting to standardize on that, or enterprise OpenAI, or enterprise ChatGPT. And so we're seeing people try to standardize tooling, but it's hard because very quickly The reality is these MCP servers are being used in applications, they're being used by agents, and it's very difficult to simply standardize on one stack. What is happening, though, is that teams are, as they always are, they're coming up with innovative solutions. People are using Git repos to consolidate all their skills. They're using, kind of registries, internal registries to try to manage MCP servers, and you start to see some standardization emerge. It's the next jump where we start to answer kind of pretty important questions about how can I prove that I know what happened in that MCP server? How can I prove that I understand what that MCP did and why it did it? And how can I prove that as an organization I've actually got controls in place to ensure unacceptable activities never happen? And this is really the requirement that most teams are in. For the last year, I've been spending almost all my time in regulated industries, governments and financial services companies and healthcare companies, because they're the most concerned about the consequences of these things not working correctly. But I think this applies to almost everyone. As we trust agents and as we trust clients to do more work for us, we need to know that we can retrace the steps. We can see what happened. We can apply observability. We can apply governance. We can set filters to ensure that actions that aren't authorized are stopped. And that requires us to start implementing controls. If you haven't already started looking at things like MCP gateways, at LLM gateways, at audit control products, this is where you begin to do that and where you need to really get there. The truth is most of those are centralized and they sit on the server side and they really require a lot of consolidation of how we access these. I think there's another step, and that's kind of the fourth point on my graph, which is eventually we want to get to the point where we can control and identify everything happening on every device, so that if we're running local MCPs, if we're running local skills, we can see those activities happening as well. And so there's even another step beyond putting in a gateway where you start to put local host level proxies and controls that allow you to do things locally, but also keep that control for an organization, allows the organization to see what skills are being used, allows an organization to see if MCPs are being written by the AI locally to access functions. So there's another step beyond that where we push that control layer out to the agents, out to the AI clients, and we can see it all happening together. And I think if you think about this in a more sort of architectural way, this is kind of what that looks like. The first layer that we as an organization probably need to be thinking about is the client, the user device, the location of the agent. That agent, we need to do things like discover what's running there. We need to remediate if things are running that aren't supposed to be running. We need to be able to understand what the user needs and give it to them. So if a user is searching for an MCP server that they have access to, we want to deliver it there. And that requires technology off the client. So while there's work that needs to be done at the client level and at the host level, there's also the need for centralized services like a gateway that allow us to manage exact permissions. What's a user allowed to do? Because we don't all have the same rights, we don't all have the same access. And how do we manage OAuth at scale? How do we manage tokens and secrets? How do we then take all that and apply access control policy, group policy? We do integrate with our IDPs. The gateway is the point where that happens. So if you're thinking about how to connect your Entra or your Okta to all the MCP servers in your registry, you want to focus on the gateway. It's also where you can begin to filter these calls and provide the governance that we talked about, audit logs and actual filters on the content, preventions of PII exiting an MCP server, preventions on personal health information going out. So implementing these layers will really take you very far. And I would encourage you all to think about this new stack that we're developing, this new stack of technology is one that is really mostly about enablement. It's about getting good tools in the hands of our coworkers as fast as we can while preventing risk from developing in our organization. And my last couple points as we wrap up, as you go home from this conference, think about three things. One, take a look, have some conversations, really think about where MCP is happening in your organization. Talk, we don't always have to scan tools, just asking people what they're doing, what they're running. Do some searches on your Slack if you're running Slack. See how adoption has moved. If If you've already got controls in place, great, but try to understand what's preventing people from using things. 2, map your exposure. Think about what the impact of those MCP servers could be. Think about where your organization is carrying risk and what that risk might look like. And then finally, start working towards a governance model. Ask the questions, what are we going to do? Are there good open source solutions we can put in place for an LLM gateway, for an MCP gateway that we can leverage to start building up controls and to start monitoring the behavior of these systems? So thank you all again for coming. It is awesome to be in Mumbai. I am so glad that we could do this event. And if you want to get in touch or anything, feel free to scan the badge and send me a LinkedIn request. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Shannon. All right, how you feeling? Good? Great. Okay, we have plenty more sessions for you today. This is the end of the keynotes. We're going to take a short little powder room break, okay? And then we're going to start the sessions at 3:20. You have 3 rooms to choose from, so pick whichever one best suits you. And then after the sessions at 6:50 is the attendee reception. That's where we're all going to get together and we're going to talk about what we learned. So from the sessions you didn't get to go to, you could catch up at the reception, okay? Sounds good? All right, I'll see y'all later. Enjoy. Thank you, Chris. Cut me off. How are you? Can you cut me off?